Welcome to the Sales Compensation Show, where we share the latest sales performance insights through in-depth discussion with experts. Season 3 of our show is your backstage pass to discovering how today's most successful sales and revenue ops teams support go-to-market strategy and improve sales performance. Plus, we'll explore what we can learn about incentives from different industries more broadly. Subscribe to hear how leaders are unlocking new growth, implementing the latest compensation trends, and their priorities for improving go-to-market performance. I'm your host, CEO of Forma.ai, Nabeil Alazzam. Mollie, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Best topic ever, compensation.
Doesn't really get better than that. I think, we both chosen to be in this space and have this be our careers for, I look at it as like many good reasons, but not very purposely thought out. I get landed here completely by accident, I think, as most people do. So I always start out by asking, like, how the heck did you end up in the world of sales ops, RevOps, sales comp?
Yeah, absolutely. I always joke because I originally went to college to be a teacher. And so I thought I would be an educator, and I went into a classroom and walked out and changed my major the next day. Right. And then, when I look actually at the world of operations, I'm still probably a teacher in a lot of ways, shapes, and forms. Right. And helping just make sure we're translating between what the business needs and like what's actually happening and being like that connective tissue for growth. And it's just in a different way. Really started, early stage in sales operations, moved through that evolution of marketing automation, marketing technology, to when we started coining the revenue operations term, which was the thing we were already kind of doing. And now we're in this go-to-market engineering and AI and new world of operations. For me, it's personally like super fulfilling and super exciting as we continue to bring the technology and the process improvement and like the connective tissue together. But yeah, I was like, I don't know that I ever fell into it. I think I just started in it and haven't wanted to leave.
The training up to be a teacher is actually a really good kind of background context to building up the patience, or the threshold of patience that you need. And then, truly the coaching along and kind of the taking people on a journey, because it is
definitely a journey.
Yeah, it is a journey. And it's interesting that because I started my career in the space around a similar time where it's like, it wasn't seen as this kind of strategic function. And I think the label of revenue operations kind of like really encapsulated that it's more than just sales. Like, it's how do you take a customer through to post-sale? How do you manage the connectivity across the board? Like, there's a lot here. It's a machine, and it's an operational process that's a very significant part of the business. And
it's the customer experience, right? And I think like as we've evolved and started to bring the pillars that go into the customer experience together, like that is the operating model. So I love what revenue operations like represents and like how we're getting there and the evolution. And I think that it'll continue to compound and persist and likely keep getting sexy titles on top of it, because I feel like that's what we like to do now.
It's like our way of kind of venturing into the world of marketing, right? And marketing ops. Yeah. I do think that the fact that the customers are showing up more educated, more prepared, the problems that we're having to solve and the pace at which you need to solve them is accelerating. Like, to me, revenue operations, I don't even think it's actually come even close to the peak of where it needs to go. And like, if you think about this, you have these platforms, these structures for how businesses operate their accounting function. Yeah. It's pretty consistent across organizations. There's all these standards. You look at how organizations, manage their manufacturing process. It's pretty consistent. There's structures. There's, like ways of doing it. When you think about, the go-to-market motion, it's chaos still. And it's not as much structure. So it's like, I think we're still kind of in the early stages of really operationalizing, this in a standardized way across the board.
And the second you feel like you get to standard, right, the expectations change. And that's one of the things that like I love about kind of where we're at. And I think that was a great call out, right? You have gap principles, you have, your DMAIC, like these other industries really have, not to say a black and white playbook, but like really a very core like standard of best practices of like you're building supply chain. Like, these are the things that you need and this is how it's done. And like you're in finance, like you have your ERP, there's, really two probably core picks, and like you set it up this way, versus like on go to market, I'm going to say like it's a free for all a little bit, right? And like, I've managed revenue operations at probably 6 different companies at this point at a leadership level, and they're all different, very unique. And like, it's funny because a lot of them could have almost 90% of the same tech stack and it operates completely different.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny because when I was a consultant, I did see a lot of limitations from the tech stack to say like, okay, you have to do it within this constraint or it's going to like require all these things. And I see the element of like, you're running a revenue engine. You need to adhere to the market requirements and the demands. So like the uniqueness it can be justified is maybe the best way to say it. It can be justified, but I don't actually think it needs to be as unique and as snowflakey within each company as it is today. And it's because we just haven't built up those structures. But over time, you're seeing it, right? Like the best practice for how to set up a CRM, the best practice to do these things, how you bring in data. I mean, obviously being at ZoomInfo, right? Like that data funnel, that structure, and kind of like the best practices are starting to make their way throughout the industry. It's just slow.
Yeah, even just like the basic thing of like the KPIs, right? Like what are the core metrics that, well, there might be different layers that you're going to put on top of them from like a dimension standpoint. Like the core metric is generally grounded and rooted and like really shouldn't be a different definition. And like I think we realize that, right? And acknowledge that, but it's, I think everyone still holds on to that like little bit of uniqueness that you think you have.
So just jumping into, a little more into the kind of the world of comp, I guess like, over your career, you've owned comp as, within sales ops and kind of have lived and seen that. I know as we were talking about before, it's like sales comp is just such this sensitive, very emotionally charged thing that brings out the best and worst of you, right? It drives and motivates, but it's also this like liability. It's this, and it's at what point do you see a comp plan kind of being a plan versus an actual liability? Like when is, what does that happen and how do you manage this?
Yeah, absolutely. And even just like digging into what you said there, right? Like comp is policy, is governance, right? Like there's so much like behind that, but it's also people's livelihood and it's the reason they show up to work every day, right? And so and I'll answer your question shortly, but like just acknowledging that I think is like one of the pieces like I didn't necessarily like maybe recognize as early in my career as I probably wish I did, right? Like it was, I mean, and I don't know. There's a few people out there that are phenomenal people who I've worked with who love doing compensation. Like, and they are just, I admire them and like put them on a pedestal and they're like phenomenal at it. I would say it's one of those things that I've had to work at to be decent at. In the fair sense of it, because I think a lot of it is being, an operator. There's this like black and white kind of emotion to things, but like in compensation, there's again that human element that like does need to require the empathy, the compassion, but also like the right guardrails to it. So I think that was just such a good call out.
When humans are difficult, right? Like that. This is the thing. In any problem,
I'm the worst.
we're all what is it, the Lord of the Flies? It's like we all have the difficulties to manage. And I think there's an element of like in any problem in business, whether it's, performance issue in the operation side, it's a performance issue in hitting numbers or whatever, it all stems from human management and compensation just adds this extra piece. I agree with you. Like it's very difficult. And
and I would love to sit here and I would be the biggest liar in the world if I sat here and told you like I build great comp plans and there's never conflict and like my comp plans at every company, even the ones that I haven't owned, like I've always had a level of conflict to them. I've always had a level of like iteration and improvement. And I think that's just like, that's natural, right? There will be that. I think it's just how you manage it. And so like when it starts to be a liability in my mind is like when you have the written one that's like truly on paper, that's signed and like what's approved. And then you have the real one that's like not documented and is the exception that isn't technically allowed, but like gets passed, like gets approved, gets, vetoed powered because like either the team doesn't want the conflict. There's this like, I hate being like the person who screams loudest gets what they want, right? But like, and a lot of times it's the top performer who woe is me and leadership doesn't want to hurt their feelings or do this. So we make the exception, right? Which isn't a comp problem. It is a governance problem and it is an actual compliance problem. And I think that's one of the big pieces that like is probably one of the biggest areas. I'd say like if you ask somebody what they don't enjoy about handling comp, it's not necessarily like in some organizations it's been the calculations and like that because they just get too complex, but it's a lot of the exception component and the noise and like the lack of respect for the plan And I don't know if that's the right way to say it. And I think like the other piece is just like, it starts being a liability if reps don't understand it. If it takes you more than 10 minutes to figure out how you're going to get paid, you don't come back from that, right? And so like they have to know how they're getting paid, what they're going to get paid, like have at least the right like visibility to it. Like it can't be a black box for them. And it needs to be like super clear. And I always rule of thumb, right? Like if your comp calculator has more than probably 3 to 5 inputs for somebody to figure it out, like you probably went too far. Like likely if it has more than 2 to 3 components to it, you also probably went too far, right? Like it should be simple. It should be moving the right things in the right way for the business that are aligned on. So I think that that's probably like where I think liability, one of my favorite like interview questions whenever I interview a sales leader is what's an exception and what's a rule. And if they mention like comp exceptions, that usually tends to be like my Achilles heel a little bit, but like really try to probe on that because there will be exceptions and there always will be, but it's like at what point is it tolerated by the company? Because at the end of the day, like if you are making exceptions to policy, it tells me you have the wrong policy.
You have the wrong policy, and by not communicating and providing clarity to the organization, which I think the best plans truly provide clarity on like what good looks like, you're missing an opportunity to actually motivate and drive behavior.
For sure.
I mean, I want to double click on something you said because it is actually so, it's so critical. It's like the simplicity side of a plan. Like obviously, simple comp plans for sure. Like you need to understand the whole premise is clarity, right? I feel like there's this misconception where people think, or like when they say simple, it's like you need to be able to draw a comp plan on a napkin. Where I find the majority of complexity comes in is in the crediting logic. This deal sold through this channel for this type of product.
It's in your ROE in a lot of places, right? And like what do I get and what don't I get, right? Which is then like the behavior that you want to make sure is really clear and like not room for interpretation. And that's where a lot of disputes come in, right? And that goes back to like good process, good ROE, good data, right? Good infrastructure and like the things that like really do move that the right way. Like I don't want a rep to go to Salesforce and I want a big sign at the front like you can't work this account, right? Like because like at the point it's tricky, right? Because like at the point they start working it and build the relationship and move it forward and you realize, oh man, that actually should go to this territory. Like don't punish the rep for something that like they couldn't easily find and manage and like know what they needed to do with.
No, exactly. It needs to be connected because if it's not connected, you end up having this like the lack of clarity where, okay, I'm working a deal. If I don't know what that deal is going to be for metric X, Y, and Z that I'm comped on, and I have to do this convoluted calculation just to figure out what like, if you're paying on like a gross margin percentage, or if you're paying on some weird metric that's like,
the metric that's calculation. You can't. Like, it's just not.
It becomes very, very difficult to actually provide that clarity to the seller of like, this metric matters more, this deal matters more. And unfortunately, I think that's kind of where the majority of the complexity that we see that actually disengages sellers, because then they just basically kind of, you see it. The average players just then kind of shift to, okay, I know if I directionally close this deal, or if I close this deal directionally, I'm going to make this much money. And that's not very motivational. You're not really connecting.
And like it's the path of least resistance, right? Like, I mean, to me, like when you're designing a comp plan, like, one of the things you always look at is like, how long does it take for somebody to break it? Right. And like your best sellers and like I mean, it's not your best, it's your smartest, right? It's the people who sit down and say, how do I make the most money on this? And like when you do that, though, you have to make that's like kind of always my rule of thumb of like when I'm designing a comp plan is like, how does this get broken? And if it does get broken, am I glad it got broken? Right. Like if I get somebody who's going to hit 200% attainment because they broke this, is it the right margin? Is it the right things that go into it? And is it that like the right behavior that I'm motivating? Or did they just figure out the easiest way to take advantage of it? And I think like that's a lot of like the scenario planning and like the components that you have to start thinking about in your comp design. Because the worst thing you can do as a business, right, is punish the person who outperformed the plan.
A good outcome is when it's gamed and it produces the right business results for the business. Perfect.
Correct. Right. And like, but the worst, and I've seen it time and time again. It's like, oh, Bobby just made, and obviously this is why you have caps and that kind of stuff. But like, he's hitting cap every time and he's, working 15 hours, you know what I mean? Like, and he figured it out, right? Like, how do we get everyone else? If everyone else figures it out, do we win?
Right.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if the answer is yes, then 100%, we should be deploying
And
this.
if the answer is no, we got big problems.
Yeah. Anything that surprised you in terms of when you rolled out a comp plan and like either the profile of sellers and how they adopt the plan or kind of like the way that people have like went to optimize or game a plan?
In particular, like there's been some things that we've done around more like, again, as you switch to the world in a lot of like consumption based organizations and things like that. And that becomes a piece of the model where you're really looking at like acquisition versus maybe value up front, right? Those are the ones that get tricky or to forecast and like truly monetize in like the earlier stages. And that's where, to me, I think you have to look at like your weighting a little bit too and like try to balance that. Because if I say, go, it goes back to like I'm going to use like the marketing analogy of like marketing, go give me 10,000 MQLs, and like MQL is like an arbitrary definition that we haven't necessarily fully assigned a value to, and I say you give me this dollar, like here's what you get to. So I think when you look at units of coming in, either acquisition of customers or logos or things like that don't necessarily stick behind a monetary piece of it, it's really hard to quantify always what that value is without a quality metric behind it. And so those are the ones that I think are valuable but tricky to like put in, because those are the ones that can be really easily gamed.
Paying on activity without some sort of compliance like ability and tracking is very.
I hate paying on activity, to be like fully honest with you. I think my philosophy is always like that's usually like my give during like a ramp stage, right? Is like, okay, like get the muscle, get the motion, right? Because I think one of the things that the companies that I've worked at have been the most successful is like the ones that can visually show a path to quota. At any point in time, you understand that, and you actually like have to be able to show activity inputs as path to quota, because if you don't do the work, you won't get the outcome. When you're in organization, you got to make 75 calls a day and like that kind of stuff like that. I hate it. But like you also kind of have to be able to like show the math to like, you do kind of have to do these things to get there. And to me, it's like, I want to be able to correlate to say like, okay, rep A, rep B, rep C. If rep A is getting to his number and he's not doing all the inputs, I want to know what he's doing, because he's doing something different that I need to go from an ops perspective, go capitalize and figure out how to scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Bring it to the masses.
Yeah. If rep C is in the 25th percentile of attainment and he's making 500 calls a day, I got to go figure out what he's doing, because he's obviously not doing the right thing, right? So it's like trying to balance like the inputs that have to get to that output and like being able to also show them those against the average, right? And pull that through. God, I wish I got paid on activity. That'd be great. If anyone's hiring, I'll get on the phone all day and smile and dial.
The cost of sales or the cost of execution in RevOps just like triples. Yeah. Activity. I feel like
we got paid per Jira ticket, right? Or Slack message. Oh man.
100%. So speaking of which, I guess like if we think about on the Jira angle here, what would happen if people treated a sales comp plan or designing a sales comp plan the way they treat their product roadmap?
Depending on the company, right? Depending on the company's product roadmap, right? But I think it's a structure, right? And I think that's like a lot of the pieces that you get in like really strong product organizations of it, right? Like you have a roadmap, you have a plan, you have metrics, you have alignment, right? You have a release cycle. And I think like that's probably the one that like I'm going to hit maybe the most on in thinking of this is like we do such a, sorry, I'm going to say shitty job a lot of the times of like actually rolling out plans to people. You think about like what's the most important, like why does this person show up every day? To make money. Where do we spend probably the least time with them? Teaching them how to make money and how to get paid, right? Like I can't, and I'm going to take blame for it, right? Like I'm probably the worst person at like putting the quick deck together and expecting people just to get it too. And like you roll out a new comp plan and you spend probably 45 minutes in total educating the field. You don't think about the things like the path to quota. You might put a calculator together. Like you don't actually spend the time with them to it, I think. So like going back to like the product piece, but you look at any major product release to the field and like the enablement that happens and like I'm going to say the dog and pony show that you tend to get to like educate on them, but we're not actually educating them on the best way to like, I'm going to say feed their families, right? And I think when you think about from product, right, you think about UI, UX, like the things that go into like the motion, right? And the behaviors that you're trying to drive and what you're trying to achieve, like we don't do a good job of that. We say, here's, your target. This is what it looks like. We don't say, here's how you're going to get there, or here's how we got there at probably the granular level that it needs to be. I think we also don't arm our managers and our directors to like be able to have those conversations as well. And I think a lot of the best managers I've had who are or not I've had, but I've worked with, like ones that sit down and actually like map out with people how to make
100%.
money.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think through too on like product managers or owners of things. I think a lot of smaller companies, right? Comp gets probably the least amount of like infrastructure love behind it
He
too.
gets relegated as like it's a cost center in most organizations.
Yeah.
And this is the crazy part is like if you think about the buckets of work in sales ops and comp, and you think about okay, the buckets of work and you rank them, in terms of like the value that they create as kind of like the area of the work, and then you stack rank them, what you end up happening is like the majority of the work is done on the operations and just getting to payouts, getting to the day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
And then all of this like value creation that can be done through better enablement, truly like walking people to their quota and like helping them understand what they need to do. You just have so little time that it's despite being the most value add, you don't end up doing it. Because by the way, this is a common thing, and
Yeah.
it's not because people don't see the value in it. Everyone sees the value. It's just so hard to execute at scale. And
I'm like, do you think it's, I'm gonna like, this feels like therapy at this point. So thanks for saving me $200. Do you think it's because we're almost, gosh, sorry, I'm gonna be a little bit of a victim right now. Like we're almost so beat down by the time we get the plan like approved through approval and like modeled and like get the blessing that we just like are like I'm almost like over it, right? That's like almost the win.
100%. So I think, yeah, I think there's an element of like just the operational lift to get it to the finish line. And then, by the way, this is the crazy part: is the plan is
You're
connected
gonna
to the
cut it.
quotas.
You're gonna cut it 500 times and back to like one of the things that you just said, sorry to interrupt you there, is like running it as a product organization. Like when you think about iteration on product, like you're usually doing like a 10, 50, and a 99 design review. With comp plans, right? Like you tend to, somebody's like model these 27,000 things through, right? And it's like you go so deep and you model everything versus like coming into the room on the 10% and saying like, here's the 6 to 8 attributes, right, that we think like could be components of this plan, right? We know we likely need to be between 3 realistically, right? To make sure we have clarity and simplicity. Like, let's look at the mix, right? What could this mix look like? Let's start to model just the mix before we then model the data behind it.
Yep.
And then though you get the conviction of like, what are the things you want to probably pull on the data? And like, then you spend the time to the 50% where you sample size, you pull, you scenario plan. And then you get to like, okay, here's the recommendation at like the 99, but like that's how you'd run it as a product organization. But I think on the upside, you're like, okay, here's everything. Let's go figure out how everything could look.
Here's everything, and then on the downstream side, like the execution side of it too, is you also have quota, right? Like which I imagine you own today, right? And so like that side is it's a whole negotiation and deployment and kind of tweaking, and you need the feedback from the field, but it's also this iterative process, and the number of the tops getting changed and all. So I think it's this coalescing of like, you're right, we don't constrain the scope of what we're analyzing fast enough early on. So it balloons to be this massive thing. Quota setting is very, very difficult because it's a whole bunch of moving targets and you need qualitative feedback, you need the quantitative analysis all coming together. And so then by the time you go to deploy, and this is what I see all the time, it's like the business is just like, okay, we're done with this. We got to get on to like hitting our numbers.
We got to hit we got to hit a deadline, right? And like that kind of thing too. And it's like you're usually already under the gun and under pressure to like hit a deadline that by the time like I'm like laughing because I'm like, I don't know that I've ever rolled out a comp plan that didn't feel rushed to get rolled out too, right? And I think that's because you're up against start of the year, start of the quarter, like clean break. We want that aligned too, and probably a lot of like our own fault, right? On like how we run and how we control it too, and like there's so many dependencies that go into it. Like finance, I gotta know what I'm trying to get to, 100%. And like we got to line on a plan on how we're gonna get there.
Finance, HR, you need to know, okay, what regions can we legally change? Can we not? Legal, like this is why I think like sales comp is one of those things where it's like it has no true home because it touches almost every part of the business, everything, including product, especially in a consumption-based business. It's like, well, how do you build the product? Is it designed to be supported? Does it need sales support on more consumption?
You have engineers, you have launch managers, you have, ops, right? And like, I always, again, I think probably one of the most thankless jobs is like the comp person, right? Like it really is because again, they're cat herding a lot of these inputs. They're coming up with the plan, and they're the ones that get blamed when it doesn't work.
It's like I always ask people this, and in our onboarding and at Forma, and I ask like new people that are coming into the space, especially if they haven't been in the industry. I'm like, when's the last time in your career have you actually reached out to the payroll team and said thank you for getting me paid?
Thanks
Like
for,
literally
thanks
never.
for
Like
paying me.
I've never had a single person put up their hand. And payroll is complex. Not to take away from payroll, it's complex, and there's compliance things, whatever. But sales comp is so much more complex. It's dynamic data, it's
Yeah.
dynamic business rules, it's exception on exception changes, and like you just
Yeah,
the miracle of getting people paid correctly. It is hard, and so
you don't get to dispute with payroll, right? Like, God, wouldn't that be fun? I'd like to contest my salary this.
I believe I did a bunch of exceptions that justify. Yeah,
Did you see how many Jira tickets I completed? That's got to be worth something.
that's literally, yeah. This is the world of sales comp. It's as a sales comp manager or analyst, like just getting the inbounds, and I did it back in the day as well, and it's painful.
Yeah, I'm like, as I'm sitting here, like the thing that keeps, I think you'll get a kick out of this, right? And sorry, I'm gonna just distract us for a second, but like, what's the worst comp experiences that I lived at? And at one point in my career, I worked with physical goods, right? That went through a reseller partner network where we paid advanced commissions to everyone. It was advanced based on what was like ordered, and the clawbacks that we had to, like, I mean, it was just one of the most operationally heavy, like when you talk about like the black box of what I'm getting paid, yeah, what you ordered, but if there's cancellations, if there's returns, right? Like, and like just the true up process was just a disaster.
Very early in my career, on the consulting, my consulting days, like I got to support an organization that had very kind of similar structure, and like 50% of the calls were actually just with sellers. And I don't know if it was the same case where you're like basically walking them through, like you find the order and you got to like explain. And this is where, again, the clarity and importance of having a reporting structure and the data hygiene to be able to communicate to a seller. That's how many hours of their sales organization. That's, probably many, many FTEs that are just being spent on time on the phone with the comp team.
Oh, and it was all Excel based, right? Because the rules were so complicated. Like no comp, I'm like, no comp platform could have supported it back then, right? Like there's probably more out there now that could help, right? But like it was you couldn't, like the waiting, all of that, it was gnarly. I think that would be my red flag of if I asked somebody on the comp structure and they're like, we pay advanced commissions and do significant clawbacks all the time with 47 different calculations across 22 columns of spreadsheets, be enough for me to walk away, I think.
Especially if there's no appetite to change the logic, because it's painful. But in that vein of like the most crazy and complex, we're at a time where it's like, okay, AI is making the ability to move quick and faster ever more apparent. And I think last minute the CRO might decide, hey, this is strategically very, very important. It's strategically important for us to like go after this thing, go after this metric, or go after the segment. And so we do have to iterate fast. I guess, like, how do you see AI kind of disrupting or changing that? And when it gets to a point where it truly can like run at a million miles a minute, like where do you think the human layer comes into the picture?
With the power of AI, right? Like data analysis, scenario planning, like all of those things are so much easier to do now than they ever have been before. I still back to like the 10, 50, 99, like using the grounding to like look at the attributes, but it should be a lot faster as you're trying to like plan, especially being able to say, okay, here's what performance looked like last quarter. Here's what the comp plan was. Here's what the output was. If we had changed these variables, all things consider, obviously no behavior change, what would this have looked like, right? And like then being able to model a lot faster. The things that you can't do well with AI is like AI doesn't necessarily know your culture, right? Like in like the people and like the human aspect of things and like the judgment can't be solved by that. I think that's always going to be the piece that like back to like why people show up every day and the human element of it. Like AI won't solve for it. They're not going to pick the sentiment up of like what's going on in the market or just those components, right, that go into like why this might feel harder. It needs to be, or like I'm going to say like, not to say the excuses, but like the excuses that are going to ultimately come up too. So I think you still will always need the human in the room, the interpretation. Like there's a level of, again, empathy that I think and which I'm obviously clearly not the right person to support that, but like level of empathy that like needs to go into these pieces too, as well.
There's an element of you want to use it as a kind of ideation partner or support. Right? You get a bunch of different, you automate the streamline of all the different paths that you potentially go, but that human kind of like layer of how's it going to be interpreted. I agree with you, the empathetic side of it, and even just like the qualitative things that aren't captured in the data today that are still impactful in the business, right? Like just the sellers are out there, they're talking to the customers, they're noticing market trends that are not captured fully in the data yet, that are likely to kind of make it signal that is like very early on, I think is important. And at the end of the day, yes, I believe that there's a future world, or the future can take one of three directions, I think, right? Like you can have like, we're going to continue being 100% human-led sales organizations. Probably not likely. We're going to be 100% agentic. Humans are going to be completely gone. Highly unlikely. I think sales is probably one of the safest spots in the world of with AI. But there is definitely like the highest probability is like a world where sellers are hybrid, right? They're augmented through agents and augmented through AI. And I think it helps them increase the TAM they cover, etc. But it's still humans selling to humans at the end of the day. It's people buy with emotion, they justify with logic. And you want to get this person up out of bed and hungry to get past the finish line. I think there's an element of it. You can bring the science and use AI to kind of craft the science, but there's the intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, and no matter how you design a comp plan, if it's not taken appropriately on the culture side with the intrinsic motivator of like what gets you up and how do you buy into this business and this problem that you're solving,
how do you know you're going to show up and make money?
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's not going to do much, right?
Great call out there though too, right? Like, and again, I believe like we're not going to go one way or the other, right? There's like we're going to live in this hybrid place, and like we will see like places where PLG and like some of those like true product led pieces will get stronger, but I also think we're going to live in the world where people want to buy from people a higher cliff, because we're going to crave those types of interactions even more.
It's interesting because you dial into a customer support line and now it's AI. Sometimes it's actually really good, right? Like and it's gotten really good at recognizing exactly where you need to go.
The expectations that you want, right? And sometimes it's like 0, 0, 0.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is like, it's in some ways I'm like, okay, this is just going to solve my problem. Great. Boom. This is fantastic. But there's some times where you're like, I need a human to empathize with this problem that I have, because it's unique and it's not going to perfectly fit into the guardrails and the policy that this business has. And in that moment, it is the absolute worst customer experience to be dealing with an AI that won't let you press 0, 0, 0, right? And this is where, to me, I think is the same thing in sales. Like, what is it going to be about? It's about always serving your customer, bringing them along the best journey. And for us to imagine that, okay, you're just going to toss AI and expect it to deliver everything, it's just like, it's so blind. Like, obviously that's not, no one's going to jeopardize revenue and jeopardize their customer experience because they can save a few bucks.
I kind of like, I'm like laughing because I'm like, I kind of wish it went on some of like the approvals and exceptions, right? Like where it's just like, nope, here's the ROE, right? But like,
yeah, you need to escalate it if beyond that, which this is the thing. The problem on the sales side is you have A-type profiles that are hungry, and you actually want the profiles that are willing to go through like and march through doors.
I know, you're kind of like, how bad, like, is this the hill you're going to die? You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, and it's always funny because it's like, this is the hill you're going to die on, and it's like $50. But then again, back to like the exception versus the rule, because anytime you do that, you set precedent that they like 100%. That the plan is wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
And then like, the next time it comes in, it's $1,000 and now, or whatever, or more. And
you've just shown them that the plan's wrong. And if they know the plan's wrong, they know that the plan is wrong. And I think one of the things that I have seen and felt in like these situations are the organizations where the sales leadership doesn't recognize their role in comp as like and again, they need to be bought in on it. But the second like the VP or the CRO or like sales leadership is discrediting the comp plan, like you lost your field, you lost the locker room, like you've lost all of that, and like you can't come back from that. The second people feel like they're getting screwed on a plan or it's not a good plan, it's the worst. And like that's where like I'm like, sales leadership has to be the owner of the plan. Like it shouldn't be this comp person presenting the plan to the teams. It should always be the leadership.
The leadership and cascading all the way down. I think to your point earlier, like You want that manager to coach their team on how they're going to make the most money and hit quota with their plan. And this goes back to the emotionally charged element of comp. No one actually wants to talk about money. You don't want to talk about money with friends. You don't want to talk about money with anyone, right? That's like, it's a very charged topic. And then like you see this time and time again, the comp plan gets rolled out and then people just like pretend like it's not even there and they just like move on, and it is there. It should be part of the conversation. But I was going to ask you, what your hot take in sales comp is, but I actually think that, what you just said.
You probably know what my hot take is.
And I think that, the fact that what you stated is actually a very powerful statement that I think most, more people should like lean into. There's exceptions that you let through. It's basically the plan is broken and it becomes a rule if you don't. I think owning that and really kind of making sure that it's owned by sales, it's very important, but certainly could be seen as a bit contrarian or controversial. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's tricky, right? Because it's like how much also though with that mindset and that philosophy is like how much is sales involved in creating the plan too, right? So like on the flip side, you have to then make sure you're getting the right feedback loop and like probably the right comp committee and like making sure they're involved in the process if you expect them to be the face of the ownership.
Finance sets guardrails and ensures that it's kind of like structured to pay out at a level where the business is comfortable. But I think you need to give the ownership to the incentives that the sales team is putting in front of their sellers and ultimately giving them the ownership. One question, kind of as we get closer to wrapping up here, when you think about kind of like a myth in the world of, sales performance management, something that comes up all the time, you're like, no, that's absolutely wrong. Like what?
Yeah.
Does something come to mind?
Yeah, I think the big one on this one is like we always look at like attainment, right? Like quota attainment, and like as a percentage is like, wow, look at the comp plan, right? And like, pending the size of your organization and like those things, like you can take the aggregate and be like, yeah, we, are hitting, 90% of plan consistently. Like that doesn't actually tell you if your comp plan is working. To me, like one of the things that I always look at is like the attainment distribution. Because like back to like you could have one person who's like consistently blowing out your plan and like moving how you're looking at performance, right? And so to me, I always try to look at like the histogram of my plan and like where the clustering is happening on this too, because like based on like where your team's sitting, like likely tells you if your comp plan is working or not. And like you want to have the right level of distribution. If you're seeing too many people, right, over attaining and that, like you probably don't either have the right targets in place, you don't have like the right weighting, like there's something missing there. Like if you see a ton of people at the bottom end and a ton of people at the top, there's likely some skill issues that are happening and like those pieces. And I think like so many people start to look at like what is just this attainment number as like, yeah, like I don't care what my average attainment is because it doesn't like it matters, but it doesn't matter because it still doesn't get to like what's actually happening.
It's not at a fidelity that is going to actually inform
in the design. And like I know one thing that like managers particularly hate is like when you start looking at like RPR of like your team, right? And you start to say like, hey, managers, like you get paid off of like your team all being above a threshold, right? Which changes a narrative of like you can't bank on Bobby over here being your top performer if Sally and Joe are like underwater because like your RPR isn't going to be there. And like that to me is far more important that you're building consistency in your team's quality than what you see in a lot of organizations where like the manager's like, all right, here's my golden pony and here's who's going to get me paid. Like I'm going to put my investment there versus like putting my investment across my field the right way.
Awesome. Well, no, I think, this has been a great conversation and I really appreciate, I love the candidness. It's not easy and the space is hard. It is thankless, but at the end of the day, I do find like it's the rewarding element of it is you are close to the real business vision, the strategy. You're kind of in those rooms when big decisions are being made. And at the end of the day, it's the revenue engine of the business. It's ultimately fueling the next chapter of whatever organization you're working at. And I think it feels good to be there. I do ask, all of our guests 2 questions and would love to ask you and get your answers here. So in the industry, is there anyone in particular that you'd love to take out to lunch and why?
Probably almost like everyone. I think like you want like my like hot take, and I won't like name a person on this one because this is gonna sound really, I'm gonna say really shitty to say. But there's probably a few like LinkedIn influencers that like post a lot of stuff that I think is likely bullshit. And I don't want to take them to lunch to like call bullshit on it, but I would love to take them to lunch to like really understand how they're doing the things that maybe they're saying that they're doing that like feel incorrect, right? And a lot of these like, we're building this great thing and like it's doing this thing and I'm generating 10 million, MQL, leads and, all the things. A lot of like these, like I'd call them like growth hacky GTM engineering agencies out there. And like part of it to me is more like, guys, like you're almost making the situation worse because you're full of shit. And that's
No.
That's a spicy take, right? But it's, if you are doing it, I want to know how you're doing it. But based on like my experience and what I understand and how email domains work, right? And deliverability and like that kind of stuff works, I have a hard time believing it.
If it worked, they wouldn't be LinkedIn influencers. They'd be running a massive
they'd be on a beach.
Organization. It'd be an entertaining lunch. That's for sure. And then final question is there a book, a podcast, and kind of a resource that's shaped how you led and how you lead your team today and that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think there's probably like two, right? One of which like it's You Win the Locker Room, right? I think that's just generally like my leadership philosophy. I'm on the field, like roll up your sleeves. Like you've got to win the locker room, you've got to win the trust, you've got to build the credibility like with your team when you're on the field. And then I think the other one that sticks with me is like anything by Jim Collins, I think is always just phenomenal from a book perspective. Maybe he's who I want to go to lunch with, right? Like I think just super smart, 100%. Inspiring, and like just like fire bullets, not cannonballs, right? And I think that's such like a mindset in like an operations mind, right? We're always looking at like, how do we do the big thing that's like the cannonball, but like you're gonna move a lot faster when you just start firing the like bullets to get there. And so trying to like always recenter myself on like, I know what the ideal state looks like in the future state that I want to get to, but it's like, what's the incremental like steps that we do to get there? And I think that's just a great reminder.
It's I do think that Jim Collins' great. I mean, like good to great was like such a
good to great, great by choice, like built to last, right? Like man knows this. I mean, he's got the experience, but like knows the shit, right?
So I recently heard I heard this on another podcast, but and it was the fact that apparently good to great came from Jim went to a dinner and he had to fly for this dinner, went to this dinner, and someone beside him said, because he was writing a book about how like companies go from bad to good.
Yep.
And then the person beside him at dinner literally said, going from bad to good is not hard. It's going from good to great is actually the really, really difficult thing. And it literally set him on his direction of becoming this incredible author and, writing such a great book. So it's the whole premise that the person was saying on the podcast is around the tax that you have to pay, because you might have to go to 10 dinners before you get that insight. And I think it's the same thing. Like, that's funny. And I'm wrapping up here. It's like, you might have to do 10 meetings, with sales leaders to get them to truly buy into that comp plan. But once you do, that tax that you paid in the first 9 meetings pays off.
Yeah, hopefully a lot faster in the future, right?
Mollie, super glad that we recorded the episode today.
Best conversation about comp I've had.
The therapy session for both of us being in this space. So no, I appreciate you coming on and sharing with the audience and in the broader community. Always great.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Sales Competition Show is brought to you by Forma.ai, the sales performance management platform that fully integrates sales planning with rapid, scalable incentive compensation management. Our data platform brings together how you can plan and manage the entire lifecycle of territories, quotas, and incentives. With global customers like Autodesk, Stryker, and Hootsuite, we enable go-to-market teams to plan and deploy even the most complex SPM strategies at speed, taking you from idea to execution instantly. To learn more about Forma.ai, visit our website at Forma.ai. Hit the subscribe button and find more episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.